record? Okay, thank you for the reminder. Much appreciation. All right. Round two. Awesome. Okay, so just a question, throw it out there, hopefully to get the ball rolling. And if you're just like exhausted of talking today, because you've just been sharing so many great ideas, chat box it too, type in some words. And we're hoping that we can kind of get some kind of a feel for what we're thinking about and how we approach APT. So when it comes to APT, it's like, how does it make you feel? How do you react? Is it something you look forward to? Something you don't look forward to? It's something that you're like, I got this piece of cake. Like, what's your reaction to APTs? And of course, you have Marty McFly here, who is kind of doing like that. Oh man, APTs again. And maybe that's what some of us feel. But in the chat box, or you can let us know. APTs, like, how does it make you feel? So give me a feel reaction word. All right, we feel silent. Awesome. All right, so and maybe that's an indicator that it's probably the thing that it's routine. It's what we do as part of our class design. What we submit to department chairs for feedback, and that also gets submitted to the principals so they know what you're teaching in classes. And really, it's something that is just part of the system, right? Oh, cool. Thanks for the chat box responses. So really quick, it makes Anthony feel inquisitive. Natasha says that she has time to plan. It's fun because that's when creative juices flow. I like Nandini's bleh. Yeah, that's okay. Anxious for Lavelle. She says here, when I really have the time, I like the challenge of planning. Yeah, that's awesome planning there. And also Celine says it makes her feel creative, right? And really the APTs are what we use to find out how we're going to be able to assess. Jesus Strigo says here that it makes him feel nervous, maybe excited, and for Roberto, he says that it's interesting based on the subject. So maybe some classes you teach that you really like, all invested in, are the kind of APTs where you're like, yes, this is like the best thing I've ever created as a teacher. And maybe there's a subject that you're not too well versed in, or maybe it's a subject outside of content area. Maybe it's daunting to have to create APTs for a class that you're doing it because you want to help students out, or you want to probably get a second credential in that subject. But maybe for some, that could be a slight daunting task. Anthony, any comments, feedback?
Nope. Thank you all for sharing that. Go ahead, Nandi.
Yeah. I just wanted to share that, like, because I feel like there's two things here. It's like the APT itself, like coming up with the projects and planning the classes and figuring out what you want the students to do. That part is fun. Filling out the paperwork is not that fun. So that's the bleh.
Thank you. Yeah, and I hope my bleh, I don't want that to come across as like the overall attitude towards class design, but I totally feel it's like when it comes to like the idea aspect and putting that together and like researching or gathering articles, and then you're like, oh, I got this cool thing, and then versus, okay, and I got to explain in writing what I'm doing and what my students are going to do, and that can be sometimes taxing. Yeah, Shu, got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, I think for me, I think it's exciting to do, but then the daunting part for me is I always have to do two APTs. I have to do the APT where I'm thinking and I'm using the academic language and I'm laying it out, and then I have to make like one that's really student accessible. So I'm always like making two, and that task usually kind of is a little bit of the left for me, where it's like I have to do the same thing twice.
Being a relatively new teacher still, I enjoy putting together APTs, because at the end, for me, it just shows that I've done my job. and when the students can respond and do well on them, I get excited. I know it's a lot harder for teachers that teach multiple classes, but every time when I see the end result, it's just like creating a dish or creating a team. I feel the same. I get the same excitement.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, thanks for the feedback. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yes, Celine.
Oh,
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
no, it's okay. I was just gonna say, I know it is a lot of work with the planning, but if y'all have ever sat in on like the senior portfolio presentations and you hear like the seniors share out the APT that they're most proud of and stuff like that, I feel like that moment is really rewarding when you're like, oh, I remember that APT, even if it was from like a couple years ago, right? And you're like, oh wow, that student remembered that project. They got something out of it. They learned something. It meant something to them. And so I feel like that part can be really affirming and also just really honor the work that the student put in on that project. So that part always feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially we have students who, we have students that just kind of roll on in, they finish, and we have students that come to a program, they take a break, they come back, and then like years later, like you say, it's like, oh, I did this APT for Miss Celine's class. Like, oh wow, that's an old one, but they've kept it. They remember because the learning was so impactful that they remember. And that's really important. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Anthony, you had something?
No, I was just reading in the chat, and
Ah.
I agree with a lot of what people are saying. So I really, I think Nandini said it best, that there really is two things going on. I think that there's the actual APT and the practice of not only developing it, but facilitating it and students completing it. And then there's the other documentation component, which is going to really be a good transition into the next part of our presentation, keeping that part in mind.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. We have Trigo in the chat box saying it's excited because he get to discuss real issues, but he's always nervous that students feel the same excitement and preparing them that takes attending consistently. So yeah, thank you for that, Trigo. Let me click here. So today's goals, and by all means, these are just what we're hoping to achieve by the end of the session. Is to review the components of an APT. So looking at what the handout looks like. And probably for a lot of us, we have it like just memorized because we've done it so many times, what's at the top, at the bottom. So we're like the grandmasters of APTs. We also want to hopefully create a space for teachers, staff alike, anybody who teaches to discuss, share ideas, and also collaborate with whatever you do in your class or classes that can help another teacher reimagine how they might want to design their APTs. Also, the goal is to identify the goals of an APT document. Like, what is it, the purpose of it? Like, what is it supposed to be doing as a teacher? And also, in a point of view of a student, what is the goal of an APT for a student when he or she receives that from you? Share best practices in planning and creating APT. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to do that. And also, we want to be able to support in collaborating or calibrating some kind of process that hopefully is something that I guess the majority of teachers can do, so that we're trying to do something similar. Because I know, as Brad mentioned earlier, probably what happens for some teachers is you have the APT handout and you have another one that's like your student-friendly version that we do as educators. The last goal is to take a much needed rest after this session, because you've been on Zoom all day and your eyes are tired. And then, like the dog in the little picture, get a neck massage. Maybe you'll water your lawn after this. Maybe you'll chop some veggies for today's saute. Like get a much needed rest after this session. So thanks again for coming by. So we have 3 questions, and it's kind of indicative by this microphone. So the first one is, from your experience as having taught a class, whether you're a teacher or counselor, support staff, what would you say? Oh, and I forgot a question mark. Shame on me. What are the goals of an APT? Or in other words, what does an APT measure? You can use the chat box, or if you can kindly just speak up, that'd be great too. So what are the goals of an APT? And or another question to that. Yeah, I keep doing that, folks. I'm so sorry. What does it measure?
Measures academic skill. The way I look at it, the skill building that was expected to happen during the semester is going to measure that. It's going to also measure the a or more than one culture competency expressed by the students in working out that academic side.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. In the chat box, Celine says to give students an opportunity to demonstrate their learning. Bernardo says to apply content in a meaningful way in their own lives, in their communities, etc. Marita says to measure leadership, culture, and academic growth.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say the A part, that authentic piece is really important for me, is trying to tie it to some type of real world application. So kind of like what Bernardo was saying about it being meaningful. It's how does it like practically apply to a real world problem? So how are they producing something that isn't just for, again, that classroom, like it's not a quiz, it's not a test, it's not something that is only for our consumption, but it's something that could be translated to the outside world. And if it ultimately actually is, so if they're producing something, it's actually going out there.
Right. You're looking for ways to make it authentic, to make it, in that sense, relevant to our students. So yeah, thank you for the comments from all of you. Nandini says here in the chat box, it measures student learning based on standards and the skills learning outcomes. And it also measures retention. In certain higher level of Bloom's APTs, the students should be able to demonstrate critical thinking and their ability to produce work based on the learning, like making something new or unique, right? So awesome responses. So yeah, so that's the goal, right? To measure, to assess, to really be able to know if they're learning these skill sets, but are they demonstrating skill sets, but are they using that to create something new that's higher order thinking, that's creative or unique? Like, it helps to measure those areas and helps to see, okay, wonderful, the student did really well. And then, or we find out that something else was lacking, or maybe in something in your teaching, you realize, oh, that's why the APT bombed, because I didn't cover this thing in my classes, right? So it's also a moment for us to assess how we do as teachers. Next question is, what do you all appreciate about the APT? Like, what do you say, like, yeah, I like this, I'm into that, I'm cool with this about the APT, I like it when this happens. Like, what do you appreciate about the APT?
Are you talking about the construction of them? Or are you talking about the students?
It could be either or, because a lot of this is also looking into the perspective of students. So
I just like, when I give them a chance to write, I just like to read it. I have to be honest with you. I look forward to their writing, the creative ones. You always get ones that bore you to death. But that's why God created alcohol, I suppose. But there are some that are amazing, and I those are like, I love reading them. I hate reading the good ones first. I love like the hidden gem. I'm 3 in, and then this amazing one comes. So, but I always tell the students, like, be creative, entertain me. If you're gonna lie to me, make it a good story. At least let me be entertained while you're doing it. So I want that for the APTs as well. So that's what I love. I love that creative part when they get to be creative and I get to see it, even in there, if I'm allowing them to do it in drawing or any other way, just to see how amazing they are, is the fun of it. If it's the boring academic stuff, even I get bored. So that's what I love.
Right on. Thank you. Here in the chat box, the guy says she loves students' creativity in their APTs. Nandini says she likes to see that they've learned something and that she hasn't been talking to them for 5 weeks, which is pretty cool to see. Like, hey, you guys have been listening. Awesome. Great APTs here. And Trigo says the interdisciplinary and the social justice connection. Awesome. Anthony, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I really love about APTs is it provides students opportunities to become, teachers and to really express what they've learned and how they are taking in all of this content and how they're creating knowledge themselves. And I love seeing, similar to what Matt mentioned, when students just put together something that I'm like, I don't even think I could do something this well. Like, you just did something really amazing. And those moments are always very refreshing and energizing. And it serves as a check, right, to never underestimate our young people, because they, time and time again, they will surprise you.
And for me, I like the the openness, the fact that you can really create your projects. Like you have that freedom, that ability, the freedom, the liberation to really design these projects that you feel fits with what you're learning, so that if you want to integrate some kind of artistic component with APT, you could do that. Like, you're not bound to a one way of measuring or assessing. And so I like that. I like that I'm able to really just kind of try ideas out. And the students are the best way to know if it was an APT that was meaningful, their work, and that's like one of the best way to get the data to find out. Cool. I got 10 who turned into APTs. Awesome. What worked? Why did it work? And looking at those components to ask ourselves, well, how can we can replicate this for all the classes? Kikai in the chat box says, I received some really dope APTs over time, and they always impress me. Excuse me. I like giving them praise afterwards and building their confidence. Absolutely. I also appreciate that we're able to give a cool, relevant project in lieu of a final assessment. Yeah. And the feedback, super instrumental for their growth, and that's how they know that they're doing great work in your class. This next question kind of was already touched on earlier by some teachers, and it could be the thing we can spend more time to talk about, or we can then segue to the next. But the session for today is asking for really your feedback or questions you have about the APT. Back in, was it May or June, but probably May, a survey went out to all the sites, all teachers, to get feedback about like the LP manual, the curriculum, the program collaboration document, and all that. And so there was some feedback offered about APTs. So what I'm trying to say is there was initial feedback offered, but we're also trying to be very intentional to see what kind of feedback or questions you may have about the APT that we can use probably as talking points for further discussion, or they could be ideas that we can like take into consideration and then use it as a follow-up to another gathering where we can have more APT discussions. So any feedback or questions about the APT that you might have, things you wonder, like why do you got to put this on the handout, or why do we have this instead on the handout, or like anything that you've wondered, or it's been more like, I'm cool, I just kind of fill in the information and turn it in. So any feedback or questions about the current APT that we have?
I have something. I was just thinking as we were discussing, I think it would be helpful or useful if there was like a checkbox thing somewhere that I like, maybe for each content area. It's like, okay, what skill is addressed, or which competency is addressed, and it's just like it has like a list of the ones that you can just check off on a box. Like, okay, I'm gonna, on this APT, I'm gonna check off vocabulary development, or I'm gonna focus on social awareness. as a competency, just to kind of like keep in mind as you're filling out the paperwork, like, okay, this is what should be measured and in some regard, like, okay, I'm going to touch on, you know, this, and that. But then that just adds another box and more more areas to add to. So I'm sure that's probably a terrible idea too for some. But I don't know, just thinking about it out loud.
And that's okay. That's exactly what we want to hear, like things that you thought about, like, oh, would it be nice if we had check boxes or something else, because we know that would be really good to know, like what teachers are thinking about, because when you're out in your classrooms and you're designing courses, like you're thinking about these things because you know yourself what it is you're going to be teaching, and then and assessing when the time comes. So that we're just kind of curious, like, well, what is it that you're thinking
Or like
about?
as
So
a
that's great idea.
reminder, like a reminder to like keep you grounded in that planning process. Because it helps with backward planning. Is like I try to do the APT thing before I do, you know, the actual lesson planning that comes before it. So I mean, maybe it just keeps your eye on the prize at the end point.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. In the chat box here, okay, it's from Nandini. She says that she feels like there are some boxes that are never used on the APT form, like credits earned, letter grades, teacher commentary, etc. Since we don't grade the students on the sheet directly with Schoology and Pathways anymore. So that's very, very good to point out. Kakai says here, it makes me sad that some students don't turn them in when I know they're fully capable. It's like they don't trust themselves or get APT anxiety or something. So she wonders what other teachers do for the APT, culture assignments or culture APTs probably, and how to grade something so subjective. So, and that's hopefully something we can get into in today's session. Anyone else? Any other feedback or questions? Or I'm gonna pass the ball back to Anthony. Anthony, you have anything?
No, I think moving forward in the rest of today's discussion, something that I would like everyone to kind of keep in mind is, you know, when we use this document, you know, what is helpful and what is not helpful. And I did see some in the chat box, so that is informative to myself at least. But is it helpful to have a simpler document, or a document that you can easily modify to fit your needs and your classroom's needs? A general document, multiple documents, like these are things that I think I'm interested in hearing from you all as we try to, you know, reorganize the documentation part of the APT, because I think we already have in mind the purpose of it, and I've seen a lot of positive things at it. It's the documentation aspect of it that I think has been a challenge, and that's really kind of the issue that we want to focus on.
Yeah, thanks for that, Anthony. And just really quick, just gonna look in the chat box to get these voices included. So I guess Nandini's responding back to Kakai. She gives culture credits based on teamwork or participation and a completion of the class survey. It helps her to measure the more subjective standards. And also she says, you know, Nandini, having a syllabus and APT documents feel excessive because most of the info is duplicated. Brian here says, on the planning and documentation format side, over the years, I've honed my own version of the APT student handout that works for our site and my classes. And I think kind of important to know how we design not just courses, but also class documentation based on their site, unique aspects of who we work with and partner with. He says, I streamlined and simplified from the original forms. I hope it doesn't change drastically, or that we'll have some flexibility with our plans. And then Celine says, just around the language at the bottom about attaching supplemental materials to the APT. Can we maybe add links to supplemental materials for the APT? And I think that's a fabulous idea, since I know with a lot of us have been doing remote learning and have a lot of Google Forms. That's probably the thing that we might want to do, maybe something to consider. And then she says here, it's just tough because it weighs the same as the academic component. And I see Mr. Schufel with his hand up.
Mister, that's so weird. Go ahead, Zeus.
My bad. I'm sorry. I thought I didn't hear what Mario said. I just wanted to say that one of the things that so I always allowed students to give me feedback also on APTs, how to improve them. And one of the things that they recommended and I started doing is for the culture, instead of just basing the culture on a project, I base it on a daily basis. Or for instance, on the Zoom, attending the Zoom classes, because what I'm doing is I'm actually preparing them for the APT. So success, collaboration, all those things that are in the culture, they're demonstrated on a daily basis or when they attend Zoom classes. So so that's another way that, instead of, and of course you cannot those points will transfer only if you complete the academic part of the APT.
Right on. Thank you, Trigo, for sharing that. And Brett, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, it's kind of a query that I guess I was more directed towards maybe the principals, because in this discussion we've had thus far, we're kind of assuming that the two main stakeholders, well, it's not an assumption. We know the two main stakeholders of APT documentation is students and staff, right? But I've always assumed that some of those like extra boxes that don't necessarily get filled out as much, that like Nandini was referencing, were for the benefit of like other outside parties that may want to look at what we're doing. So like WASC accreditation or something like that, if they wanted to look back and like, what are you doing in your classes? And then to have that. And so I don't know if some of those need to be there as a result of that, because if they don't, then then maybe we could shed it. But that's just my only thing, is like, what else do the documents serve in terms of like other stakeholders aside from like our primary?
That's a, oh, go ahead, T.
Well, I don't know, I think you might say the same thing.
So you're absolutely right. Those part of what we use is work samples, right? Whenever we have a WASC or any sort of audit in regards to that. So standard things that need to be on there are like the California content standards that you're covering, the culture competence that you're covering, and an overview of the content, right? And what the goals and objectives are. Beyond that, some of the boxes that Nandini spoke to, like the grading and those other pieces, don't necessarily need to be there because we capture those items somewhere else. So if we're capturing those pieces in another place, we don't necessarily need to be there. I think my biggest feedback when we kind of decided to take this on is I would love for there to be one document that is useful and beneficial for both of those things, right? So right now we have the syllabus and then the APT handout. And if that could all be encompassed in sort of one thing and capture those aspects so it can be useful for everybody, and there wouldn't be multiple documents, then I think that would be great. And that's based on just what I've seen people do. A lot of times in the document, it's like copy and paste. So I see the handout, we'll call it the student handout, but a lot of times that's not the version staff gives students. And then they've copied and pasted that into the syllabus, right? So I think what its original purpose was, it's no longer meeting that. But as long as we maintain those sort of key things that I mentioned, then I think we're good. Does that answer your question, Brett?
Yeah, and I think
Yeah, no,
Brett's
totes.
present. I was gonna say there's a lot of compliance things that I think in the past we thought maybe the APT documents would help meet, but I think that we've meet it in other ways through like other reporting, even like WASC, when they asked for us to speak to our kind of curriculum and how it's meeting goals, mission, vision of our organization and other types of standards, we kind of like describe it in our WASC reports rather than like sending them a APT sample.
What I will say too for the rubric is I do think right now it is mixed across the board. Technically, your rubric in Schoology can be tied to your grade book, and some people are much better at that than others. So that's why sometimes it is good to have the APT, so it is evident how you are in fact grading that student.
Can I, if I can just ask, if the APT is an extension of the syllabus, then if on the syllabus we're saying that we're meeting these that we're addressing these particular content standards, could we not then just say that that's what the APT is doing as well, and we could just put them only on the syllabus rather than also on the APT? Or is it something you want the students to know that is being addressed on the APT as well, even though the rubric might be doing that too?
So it does vary, I think, and that's part of why we're having this conversation, is to move in a direction. I know Mario and Anthony have worked on some draft versions of the APT document, and I think that's sort of the direction that we were heading in, is that it would be only one. Students should be aware of what content standards they're meeting, why it is that you're, addressing certain things, so they should be able to speak to that. Now, they don't need to know it's, U.S. History 7.8, this is what it is, but they should know the gist of what it is they're learning. So I think including those in there is a best practice. I wouldn't omit those. Some people do a really good job of doing that in their summary and overview. Others, it's not as strong. And so, I would say it would need to be listed. So as long as we're consistent across the board and we come to somewhat of an agreement on the APT and how to move forward, I think we can make it as least frustrating as possible and as intentional and as purposeful as possible, because we don't want you guys completing stuff just to feel like you're checking boxes. This should be a tool that you're able to use and that we're able to use for multiple things.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Tisoc and Sonia, for your responses. Going back to the chat box here, I'm trying to make sure I don't forget someone. If I forget you in the chat box, I'm sorry. I'm looking at Brian here. He says he appreciates that we have one main unit planned for an APT rather than long-winded daily lesson plans like at mainstream schools. Question from Jesse: is there a way to submit APT docs through Google Forms so it's fillable and there are specific sections that tell us that are required, which I think is that's a good idea to look into. It can help streamline the process. I'm gonna go back here to the little pictures. I have Sir with his hand up. You got a question or comment?
Comment.
What's up?
Comment and a question. And speaking with Kakai, it helped me to be more confident in my approach to the authenticity, but it also speaks to the challenge of creating one document as an APT. For example, for me, the authenticity of U.S. history begins with the young person, and what do you want to know about history? And if it's like, I don't really care, like, what are you into now? So I have young people that say, I only thing I care about is cars. And so I'll say, well, then your APT is a history on cars. Where do you want to start and having that conversation? So that young person, his APT looks totally different than the person who says, I'm into hair. And so it creates this challenge of me creating like a generalized, and I like to like consider how these things can be done with the student in mental toughness is what I've put up to our crew, like one, so that they are understanding what the APT is, and again, speaking to the authenticity, I believe it is in the demonstration of learning, but it starts with whatever is going to be learned. And so I think the APT, in order to have that authenticity, needs student input in its creation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Let me just kind of click here to see anybody has a digital hand up. No, I think we're good. All right. All right, cool. Before I move on with the slideshow, Anthony, you want to chime in or are you good? Okay. So check time 4:11. So we'll see how far we get. So here is well, we probably know already the standard APT form that we use, that is included in the ACE-LP manual that's been with the charter schools since ACE was created back in, I believe, 2011, 2010, maybe, if someone can correct me on that. But I mean, it's a form that has been around since then to try to capture, in essence, what it is students will be doing for this project in your class, in terms of describing the description of it. And over the times, I remember past PDs from years ago, how this form has evolved to include feedback from teachers. Much of what's happening today, and I recall once there was a feedback that said, how come we don't have a section that tells students how they could be eligible for the APT? And that's how we began to, or maybe some of us, not all of us, we began to include things like, okay, well, we got to have 80% attendance and must have completed 75% of your classwork, like some kind of criteria that we put in place. So that I just say that to show that in the past 8 to 10 years or so, this has tried to reflect like teacher input, but I think also too, it's been a form that hasn't really been really addressed or talked about maybe in the past 5 years. So when the survey went out to get people's initial input about their thoughts of ASLP manuals and things that they thought could use like a retouch or reformat or re anything, that's where this comes into play. So this is like the form that we typically fill out, and yeah, there's parts that we fill in. Maybe parts you feel like, I don't know what to put here, or you just kind of ignore it and you turn it in. And probably from here, probably some of us use this to make it more creative, and you probably modify it to make it more student friendly, and you probably end up giving this out to students. Or if you do what I do, and maybe some of you do what I do, is you create another handout that's more student friendly or student based, I should say, because in that handout, I kind of provide like the checkbox of what they got to be doing, how they'll be graded for the project, like it kind of walks them through. But this is like the format or the form that that we know has been like the standard thing for some time now. Anthony, you're good? Yeah. So as one, here's from one of my classes, and I just and I'll be just very honest, like what I do. If I do the course syllabus, which is a lengthier document, that itself provides the grounds for what I'm going to do in that one trimester or one term from start to finish, and not exactly like per lesson, but in terms of where I want to take my students in the learning process, in a discovery process, which serves as a vehicle for me to envision like, okay, we're going to talk about these themes and these topics, and then there's a space where I put in what exactly we're going to do in terms of APTs. But then what I do is when I turn these in, I just, as was mentioned earlier, I just copy what's in the syllabus and I just kind of put it here to show to who's going to look at it, like what my essential question is going to be for that class, a description of APT, which if you look at it now, it's pretty like not as elaborate as it can be. And then the eligibility component for what I would be able to use to accept and grade APT from a student. Below that is the competencies that we put in for humanities or STEM, and also the culture competencies that is something that probably is part of the project, or it might be something that is like mini, let's say like assignments or projects you do in the classroom that leads up to the project itself. But that's where we put in what we're targeting in our competencies, and then the criteria or required elements, which here I just put in for this particular APT of writing. The fact that I'm looking to make sure that students respond to the prompt, they follow the English conventions, but then because there's more to that, that's where I provide a secondary document that really just kind of goes more in detail about what it is I'm looking for in the APT. So this is what we know, what we've been familiar with. And based on the time, I don't know, Anthony, what's your take on this, if you have time for breakout rooms? But we were kind of hoping, and hopefully saw the email that went out yesterday, and I'll take the blame. I meant to send that out sooner, is that you were asked to bring an APT from one of your classes to the session, because Anthony and I thought that it'd be a great idea for for teachers and staff and support staff that teach a class to be able to share your APTs with others, to kind of let others know like, hey, this is what I do and this is how I do it and here's why. Because we want to be able to just kind of share best practices. And probably what some of us do is like, oh yeah, I want to try that idea. And maybe some of us are onto something that is more simplified than we may realize. Anthony, your take, breakout rooms, how do you feel? Because it's for 17.
Yeah, I think that, you know, something that Mario and I had in mind as we're developing various drafts is it's going to be an iterative process, I think, in trying to develop some model that could be used and modified for everybody's classroom. And I know that's difficult because the idea there then is to develop one, right? But I'm also open to developing multiple, whatever works for people's classroom. So maybe in the follow-up meeting, whoever does, want to meet up with us again after this, maybe then we can share some of these examples.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, because I'm like, the time. So, but what I can do, if it's okay with Anthony, I'll just share like our working documents we've been doing. As one example of what we try to do in a traditionalist kind of form, kind of approach. But an example of that is not the thing that's going to be. It's just one way that we can probably try to reimagine what the APT could look like. So let's bypass Will Ferrell here. And here is what Anthony and I had been working on for some weeks here when we started to talk about ideas of, well, what does APT ask students to do? What is it asking teachers to do? Is there anything on the form that is needed, not needed? But I think it kind of came down to the crucial question, what is it that students need to know on the APT form? But keeping in mind too that, for some teachers, they don't give out the APT handout, they give out a different version. So, this is one draft out of like 5 that I tried to like play with the format and all that. And then what we have that's in text here is what Anthony provided as an example. But you could probably see that in this version that could or could not happen is essentially kind of keeping the format, but it reduces or eliminates a lot of the borders that we have in the current APT document, so that attention is focused on the description of the project, which is, I think, what students want to know. They want to know, what do I got to do? What's my project? What's my APT? What do I need to do? So they're focused on that. And I think the other thing that they want to know is how many credits you're going to earn for it. Yeah.
So when that question right there is just like, that one right there, it drives me nuts, right? Like what is my APT? And I don't know like if other people are shaping it up. And so is it okay to jump in here, Mario?
Yeah.
Like, so I can't see if you can see me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll like share with people, I'll say like, an APT can be a PowerPoint or a Prezi presentation. It can be public speaking. It can be you writing an article. And once I started seeing people like, what do you mean? So I started saying, let's make this a cap, and asking the class, okay, well, if everyone writes, like I was telling in the last class about Miss Lemert Park, right? Maybe you're not into your focus isn't gentrification, but you're like one of those students saying, just tell me what I'm supposed to do. That is a frustration to me, because I say to them, I'll do that. But our whole point of APT and allowing leadership is to set you free. What do you want to do? Do you want to do a 30-second soundbite that I can maybe pitch to KJLH or this new talk radio station that's on AM? Do you want to cook something so I can connect you with chef at a whole nother school? And they just go, no, I want you to tell me, what am I supposed to do so I get the grade? And I go, okay, write a letter. We're writing letters to Obie Weather in prison. Very serious. And people get into it and they're on there, but then some are like, that's traumatizing to have people in prison. I don't want to write that, so that point, I just wanted to go on that point. What I do try to do is like lay out, here are the possible ways in which you can authentically, how you want to, present what we've done this month, what you've learned, what it is. And like you said, just in that subjectiveness, also asking them, how do you feel about what you did? And this is how I get to the culture competencies of leadership and collaboration. All right, you don't want to grade your own stuff. Look at what this person did. Or all of us are involved in the demonstration of learning. And so in that demonstration of learning, we're all able to contribute and collaborate with, oh, this could be done better. This could be done better. Not like for a grade thing, but because you plan on really making your website this, or you're really trying to build your business. This is what you're doing as a hairstylist. And so, yeah, I understand, because it's like, that's not how school was. It's how they say, you know, that doesn't make sense. But I try to hold firm and not give in to, all right, read 3 pages, answer these questions, and in 10 weeks, you know, I'll assign something that you show me what I told you. That is what I fight against. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Hey, Mario.
Yes, and thank you, sir. Yes.
Sir, thank you very much for sharing. You know what, sir, as much as you want to encourage them to be creative and express themselves and whatever they want to, sometimes when we give them too many choices, it's bad. It's bad when we give them too many choices. Sir, if you tried maybe limiting something related to art, maybe something related to writing, maybe something related to music, I don't know. Maybe think about that, sir. Maybe, you know, they have the opportunity of doing something with music, something with art, maybe something with writing, and 3 choices compared to, sir, I don't know what the heck to do, but there's so many choices. There's so many things running through my mind. And if you give them 3 choices, maybe that would be better. Think about that.
So when I was working with Shufelt, I had a same kind of thing. And he gave me a really good idea, which was create a list of like some options and then tell the students to pick 2 of those 2 options. Like sometimes I'll do something where it's like, I want you to create some kind of thing to send out information to people. So you can pick a flyer and a pamphlet, or
I think we lost him.
I want to add something to that.
6 options that I have.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mandy. I didn't know you were. I'm speaking. I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, you're good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add something to that because, you know, I think that what makes what we do for our program unique is that we can take the time to assess who our students are and their learning abilities, and we can adjust, you know, our APTs, our assessments, or whatever we want to call it, to our students. And the engagement during the course of the term helps us to gauge how we can set up the APT, at least for me, and I think also for Sir, for what he teaches. You know, I don't think it's a matter of giving them different choices. I think it's a matter of us being able to rise to the challenge to keep the young people engaged, even during APTs. I think now, are we going to engage them 100%? No, we're not. But I know that if we are able to present the content in a way that it keeps them engaged and gets them involved before the APT, because the last APT I did with the students, they were involved all the way up until they actually had to turn the APT in, and then they came up with all this wonderful work. So I think it's our challenge to come up. It's not going to always work 100% because we have a mixture of students across the board. But I think that not being a teacher by trade, but learning what I've learned over the last few years, we have an opportunity to develop a relationship with the students, find out their learning styles, find out who we have, and adjust what we expect from them in terms of assessment accordingly. And I think that's the uniqueness of being able to teach for a charter school, teach for youth build, because we're actually developing these relationships, and hopefully we can have some of our students walk away with something other than just a structured test. You know, so and that's just listening to what everybody says here, because I always go back to the students that we teach. We have to take them into consideration. So.
Yeah, great points overall. And just a time check, we got about 3 more minutes left. I see some digital hands being raised. So we'll make an option. Do you guys want to go beyond 4:30, keep talking some more, or would you guys like to table this? Because Anthony and I were thinking that we knew this is just an ongoing conversation, nothing to be decided for today or to figure it all out, but it gives us plenty of material to think and to process, because we want this to be really effective for teachers, but also purposeful for students. So we thought that we could probably meet up again either next week or in 2 weeks. Most likely a lot of sites are not in classes yet, but of course we have like site commitments. You might have like site meetings, whatnot. But Anthony and I would like to create another space soon to continue the dialogue, so that hopefully we can actually share APTs like we had thought we could do today, but also keep the ideas going so that we can kind of get this in a direction that works for all of us, but knowing that it's not something that's going to happen right off the bat. So are we cool to end, or do you guys want to continue for a little more? Because I don't want to negate the folks with their digital hands, but I want to be respectful of the 4:30 time.
I want to continue.
Yeah, well,
Of course
Mario,
you do. Of course.
if it's fine with you, Mario, and everybody else, maybe whoever wants to sign off, we can.
Okay,
everybody can
fair
sign
enough.
up whoever wants to, and whoever wants to hang out, we can hang out a little bit longer.
Fair enough. That's a better idea. Thank you, Anthony, for saying that. All right, cool. So if you want to stick around, feel free. If you're like, I'm cool. Thank you for coming. Really, honestly, appreciate your attendance, your participation, your energy, your love. And if you do leave, or whether you do leave or not, there will be an email either from you or Anthony that's going to invite people back for like another session on APT documentation. And then we'll continue the dialogue from there. So otherwise, thank you. Anthony, yes.
I just want to say really quick, I put it in the chat, but if you didn't see, because we're revising this and it may not be in its best state until maybe towards the end of August, we will not be requiring you guys to do your APT submission until the end of September. Now, no, you still need to plan and kind of figure out what you're going to do, but the actual forms will not be due till towards the end of September. We're going to try to move this along, but we don't want to rush it where it's not what we, the end product that we want. So I just wanted to mention that to you, especially for those of you that are starting Monday.
Sonia, I think someone asked real quick on the chat if they've already created the APT and have the form already filled out, are they required to change it if there's like a new form coming to us? Like,
I think for T1, we'll take either or if you guys have already done that, but we want to make sure it's purposeful and intentional. So those of you who like to request extensions, if you're doing that, then it would be expected you're using the new form. Those of you who like to submit early, if you're sending them to me like next week because classes start Monday, then I totally understand that. I think we can be flexible in T1, but by T2, the expectation would be to transition. T, you're good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that, definitely.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonia. Cool.
Thanks, Elvira, for pointing that out.
Awesome. Thank you. Anthony, if it's okay, I'm going to give you host duties, because in case I need to bail eventually. So let me do that right now. In the meantime, would you be able to address the digital hands that are raised?
Yes, of course. So I don't know the order. I'm just going to go on my screen. So I got Brett, then Jesus, and then Matt.
Mine was just really quick, and it was to kind of point out. I threw it in the chat, but I just kind of wanted to throw out just. I think the youth that we work with are coming from environments where their voice was never something that was cultivated or asked for, and so they don't know how to use it when we give them the opportunity. And so we even have to build that into our APTs, is teaching people how to become learners, right? And how to take space and how to be willing to claim that space, right? And so I think it would be very daunting for a student like first time coming in from like a traditional school setting. It's like you get to pick your APT. And it's like, whoa, you know, I used to sit in the back of the classroom and you know, it's giving them those opportunities, and it's like building up. And so that's my 2 cents on.
Cool. Then Jesus and then Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, because I work closely with Sir